That is James Mennie over at the Montreal Gazette. So, Jim, I want to start by talking about this generational split that you're suggesting, maybe developing in Quebec politics. So, where's this coming from?
Well, listen, our good friend Philippe Fournier, who's a poll aggregator, in his spare time, because his day job is he's an astrophysicist. He did a breakdown of the latest Leger poll, and it's kind of interesting to note that we kind of knew that the CAC had its hooks into that demographic, 55 and up, and the breakdown is for that age group, 52% support for the CAC, then it plummets to 20% support for the Quebec Liberals. That's interesting. When you go down a little further, you go to the equally famous 34 to what is it, 55, I guess. Well, we're looking at a rather interesting situation here because support for the CAC remains high. It's 41%, a little bit lower than what they're polling in terms of overall popularity. And the Liberals are bringing up the rear here at 17% in second place. But then you get to the 18 to 34 group, and even though the CAC's doing okay at 30%, they're 5 points behind Quebec Solidaire. Now, this is a government, I wouldn't be making a big deal out of this were it not for the fact that the past 4 years have proved to us that this government, as we just heard with the report on Bill 96, loves to introduce very intrusive legislation. And you have to ask yourself the question, how long is it going to be before that gap widens between people of a certain age, as we say in these parts, who perhaps see the world and Quebec in a different way, perhaps in the way it was, and a group of people who are seeing a Quebec that could be or perhaps should be. I don't think it's going to manifest itself yet, certainly not in the coming election, because it's a sad state of affairs in Quebec and indeed across Canada. People aged 18 to 34 don't exactly bother to vote. But you have to ask yourself at one point, what will it take for them to actually head to the ballot booth? Right now, we're talking about, laws that, and I think they get away with it with Bill 96 or Bill 21, the ban on religious symbols, because for most Quebecers, it doesn't affect me. It's affecting some other guy.
Yeah.
But we got a recession coming up. Even the premier says it's a 50-50 chance. The economy is going to come crashing down on our heads one way or another. So it's going to be interesting to see what cuts, what belt tightening, what changes to the status quo, which I think is what a lot of people like about the CAC, is that they don't rock the boat too much for the majority. But if they begin to have to do that, I have to wonder if those numbers are going to change, and indeed whether people will start to look at alternatives from the CAC. Right now, it looks like it's a lead pipe cinch. They'll be here for another 4 years, but those 4 years, or perhaps even the 2 months we have left between now and voting day, given the way events have been moving along so quickly, you really have to wonder whether indeed it will be more of a generational than an ideological split between Quebecers between now, say, and even 2 years from now.
Yeah,
who knows where the world's going to be, and who knows? Francois Legault's good at addressing perceived problems, or as some say, providing solutions for problems that don't exist. When the real world steps in, it looks like it's stepping in big time, whether it's the economy, the environment, and basically, where Quebec is headed. Let's see if he's as decisive, and if those moves are as popular in the days or the months or the years to come as they seem to be at the moment.
I wonder too, Jim, if you base it on demographics that way, if that maybe explains why Quebec Solidaire is starting to do a little bit better.
Well, certainly they're more visible. Certainly, our good friend Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois had a lot of pre-campaign publicity. I mean, he was one of the organizers of the Maple Spring. People know his name. And it's interesting because the survey that we're talking about, the Leger survey, found most respondents, the old, who would you want to have a beer with? He won. So, and I know that's kind of a ridiculous question. It's very unscientific. But all that
but it says something, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you do. I mean, people want to be led, but they prefer to be led by people they like rather than people they don't. So that could play, down the road, that could be an advantage. I think a lot of people are concerned. Like, it's kind of weird, though, because this is the thing with Nadeau Dubois. On the one hand, the clear illegal discrimination in Bill 96, he's okay with that. The clear illegal discrimination in Bill 21, no, if we get elected, we form a government, that thing's out the window. So, there's that to deal with as well. And not just for Anglophones. I think Francophones might be scratching their heads over that one as well. But all that said, to a certain extent, politics remains show business. And I think when it comes to, pleasing the audience, I think Nadeau Dubois is leading the pack for now.
It's funny you say that about politics being show business, because what I was going to say was I can remember going back before the CAQ were in power, covering provincial budgets, right, and meeting Francois Legault when he was, leading the CAQ, but wasn't really a factor, a threat, whatever you want to call it. And you sort of got the impression that if you stick around long enough and you get enough face time, chances are, people get tired of governments in power, and you're the next guy up.
Exactly. You're the one they remember. It's brand recognition, if you will. I hate to sound so cynical between showbiz and marketing, but that's exactly where we are right now in politics, whether it's in this country or pretty much anywhere in the Western world. You market ideologies, you market leadership, the same ways, I hate to say it, as you market fast food.
Yeah, no, but I think that's the case. And that's why I'm thinking if Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois sticks around for another 4 years, 8 years, there's no doubt in my mind he could be the next premier here.
The question, though, is will he want to?
Well, that's a lot of time to spend in opposition if you have no plan to want to do that, I think. So we'll see. All right, Jim, let's move on. Talk about this gun issue. So today we find out literally a day after Marco Mendicino was in town, handing out money for communities to make safer places for kids. Today, the government announces that they're going to have basically a freeze, if you will, or ban imports of guns. And it's going to go into effect literally in 2 weeks before this bill, Bill C-21, even gets passed in the House of Commons.
Yeah, and that would be a really big deal if it happened that the guns being used in all these heinous crimes were legally obtained. They're not, of course. They're being smuggled. We live just north of the biggest repository of firearms on earth. There are very little controls on them, and smuggling is a real issue there. But what I find intriguing today, the announcement that got me wasn't so much the Trudeau government, as far as I'm concerned, posturing once again over the issue of firearms. I found it interesting that after the $43 million was announced yesterday by the feds to combat gang violence and gun violence, here is the Public Security Minister, Geneviève Guilbeault, having a sit-down with the chiefs of police of Laval, Montreal, and the Sûreté du Québec. And I raise it because I remember you saying, this money, it's not, gun violence is not a problem outside of Montreal. It isn't, the Montreal area. And I think everyone realizes that. But my question right now is, I remember, good Lord, it was in 1995 that this 11-year-old boy, Daniel Desrochers, was killed in an explosion in a bomb that had been placed in the wrong car during the biker wars, right? And it was at that moment, it was that child's death that really galvanized the government. They created the Carcajou, the Wolverine Squad. All of a sudden, everybody was on the same page. All of a sudden, the objective was very, very clear. I'm not saying that they haven't made it clear thus far. There's the Centaur program going after the illegal gun trade or whatever. But I'm wondering whether the table is being set, and perhaps more importantly, it's being set in the midst of an unofficial election campaign to really come down hard on the whole issue, not just on the gun smuggling, not just on the gun violence, but all of it, the gangs, the whole 9 yards. I think the government, and to a certain extent the opposition knows this as well, I think the public is ready for a lot less velvet glove, a lot more iron fist. I'm not saying it's the right way to go, but I'm saying don't be surprised if you see perhaps a more vigorous prosecution of street gangs in the Montreal area in the weeks and months to come. And really, as I say, the challenge for the cops is that up until then, I'm studying like the biker wars of 20, 30 years ago. The problem here is it's organized crime, but it's not the same kind of organized crime the cops have been used to dealing with. These are almost like pop-up street gangs, Aaron. These, there's no background. There's no roots that you can trace. There's no lines that you connect. This stuff is so fluid and so incoherent. The only constant is that firearms are involved, which is why the cops are paying attention to it in the first place. So it's going to be very interesting to see what the result will be, and that result's going to have to occur sooner rather than later in terms of the police response to this. The fact that it's Laval, that it's Montreal, and the Sûreté du Québec, certainly the last two police forces have vast experience in dealing with organized crime. I don't think they're doing this for nothing. Will we have a Carcajou moment in Quebec? Probably. How soon will it happen? I can't say, but I'm guessing it'll be sooner rather than later because, it's. I hate to say it, but it's going to be an election issue.
I hate to be the cynic here, right? To think that it will take an election to actually get this thing done and at least to step up and get serious about it. That's pretty awful to have to hear.
Well, I think it wouldn't have been an election issue were it not for the triple murder that occurred that really shocked everybody, the randomness of it. I mean, here's I don't know if you saw Francois Legault today saying, gee, I wonder how this could have happened. I'm not happy that this guy, he was deemed a danger and he was released. Yeah. You know what? It's your system, Monsieur le Premier Ministre. It's your mental health care system. It's your youth protection system. Even though you were hopping up and down about that poor kid in Granby, it's your system to oversee. And as a former Minister of Health in the Parti Québécois government, you know perfectly well how absolutely shredded that system is. So excuse me if I don't buy into your sort of outrage. The fact is, and the mental health care system, as tattered as Quebec's healthcare system is, its mental health care system is an absolute disgrace. And I think we had one example of that today. You were getting calls earlier this week, by the way, from people who were saying, what are you talking about improving services? They cut the services. Yeah. It's exactly what governments, Quebec governments, not just this one, but Quebec governments traditionally have done. So spare me the outrage. But once again, that's a little too complex. It's a lot more simple when you can have nice video and good clip of cops raiding various places, of people being arrested, winding up in handcuffs. It'll be a bit of mise en scène. But quite frankly, if it reduces the number of gunfire incidents, if it reduces the number of people getting killed, I think most people will be quite in favor of it.
James MENNIE, the Montreal Gazette. You have a good weekend, Jim.
You too, buddy.